I hope everybody can hear me. I'm Anne-Catherine from Nordic Laboratories, DNA Life, co-founder of those two companies. I'm sitting in Copenhagen in my house in Denmark. We've shut down, so it's my room here, but I put a little bit of advertisement at the back and so on. But I have a few things that I want to say before I give the stage to Carrie. First of all, I was sitting here waiting the last few minutes, and all the hellos that came in from Athens, from Prague, from Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Portugal, Germany, Ireland. It nearly brings tears into my eyes. 20 years ago, when we founded the company, we only had Danish customers. Then we started getting some Norwegian customers. And now I know a lot of things that happened in the world the last 20 years, but the world has grown smaller, and now it's actually a little bit getting bigger with all this distance. But here we are, the whole world on this call, many people. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. So I just want to say a few words about DNA Life and Nordic Laboratories. First of all, we are on a mission to try and change healthcare, impact healthcare. We want people to take responsibility and ownership for their own health, not let it be up to their own GP and so on. And in times with Corona going on now, we for sure, this is really a time where we have to look after ourselves, look after the people we love, but take responsibility and take ownership for our health and for our community's health. And with not a lot of practitioners are seeing less patients now because of it's more difficult to meet up and so on, and we are moving on much more onto online platforms. But it has allowed for more time, and with that time, I thought, well, might as well prepare ourselves for better times. And what better is there to prepare ourselves with than getting educated and getting to know the community better and the Nordic DNA Life family better. So that's really the purpose of today, is that we educate ourselves better, get to know each other better, get the lab tests that we are offering to know better, and so on. So again, thank you very much for joining. An important note is that we have a webinar next week, same time, with Carrie Jones again. Today is focusing on estrogen and estrogen detoxification in relation to the Dutch test. And next weekend she's got this cool saying about the next webinar, which is pearls and patterns in the Dutch test, which is going to be really exciting. But you need to go in and sign up. We will send out an email either later today or this evening or tomorrow with a link for next Thursday's webinar, so you can sign up there. It is recording now, so we will share the recording as well. We will also share a list of different products that are mentioned throughout the webinar now, so you don't need to take too many notes on that for sure. And then also we will share a special offer to you all, where we offer the Dutch complete test combined or in a bundle with our DNA estrogen test. This will be in the newsletter as well, but you save 30% off normal patient price. There's another product where we offer the Dutch complete together with DNA estrogen and DNA health, and that ends up that you actually get a DNA estrogen free of charge. But we will send out an email after this webinar, either later tonight or, because I'm in Denmark, so that's tonight or tomorrow. So when some of you wake up tomorrow morning. Then I just really want to say thank you to Carrie, a very, very dear friend of mine. We've been on a few trips together and enjoyed ups and downs together and so on, especially hills when we did Hong Kong up the mountain and we were all sweaty afterwards and so on. But the reason why we've been doing these trips together is because Carrie also do like a Dutch certification course that we offer through DNA Life and Nordic. And in the newsletter, I will also send out a link because we recorded the Finland event, and you will be able to purchase that as well. So, but yeah, thank you very much, Carrie. And Carrie, most of you, of course, know her. That's why this webinar has been so popular, and you already know that how she's just the goddess of hormones and the superstar in helping us all interpret hormones and take it to a much higher level. She's the medical director of Precision Analytics, and if you don't already follow her on Instagram, you should, because there is pearls and patterns and ins and out and so on. So that's really fun to follow that as well. But Carrie, are you ready on the microphone?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yay.
Yay.
All right. I'm going to screen share. Let me know if you can see it. Hold that thought. There we go. Can you see that, AC?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Here we go. All right. Is everyone ready to become an expert on estrogen detoxification? We're going to talk about phases 1, 2, and 3 to reduce risk and really to reduce symptoms in both men and women. This is the only slide where I will put an O in front of estrogen. Every other slide is going to have estrogen without the O, but I thought, given the audience, you all are used to having the O in front. So let's dive in. I have about 120 some slides. We'll go for about an hour, and then if there's time allowed afterwards, and Catherine and I can answer questions, and you can put those in the chat as we go. So our objectives, first of all, we're going to recognize the way that estrogen is cleared from the body. We're going to talk about each phase individually, and we're going to talk about the genetics involved. And we're going to talk about the gut microbiome and then discuss treatment plans, supplement specific dosing at each phase. So let's dive in to make you an expert at estrogen detoxification. This is normally now a 3-hour lecture that I give, and I have condensed it down to an hour. So we'll do it's a lot of information, but you will get access to the slides. So let's set the scene. You make or take an estrogen, you use your estrogen, you're done with the estrogen. Where does the estrogen go? And this applies to men and women, both it applies to both. So with estrogen detoxification, we're going to talk about primarily the liver. So we're going to talk about your phase 1 estrogen through your 2, your 4, and your 16 hydroxy. OH is hydroxy. Your phase 2, which is methylation through COMT. And we're going to look at the GI tract, specifically the estrobolome, which is the estrogen microbiome, and its effect on glucuronidation, and a little bit on, of course, sulfation. So we're only discussing these key parts. I realize that detoxification has multiple other pathways, but these are the specific test markers that are available. So hydroxylation, methylation, and excretion. Of course, you can get all of these SNP testing available through DNA Life. And if you have yet to run a DNA Life test, I'm giving you an example of what a result looks like. And we're going to discuss almost everything on this page today, pretty much almost everything. We're going to talk about what it means, but specifically the order it goes in and then supplements that are supportive. So let's start with phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. And we want to understand this because we want to understand estrogen dominance in men. And we want to understand estrogen dominance in the luteal phase for women. And we also want to try to reduce any kind of estrogen-related cancer risk. So this is my estrogen metabolism expanded pathway. I drew this very roughly on the computer. You can see why I am not a graphic artist. I am a doctor, and this is as creative as it gets. So the way that it works is it's just a simplified steroid pathway of how estrogen moves out. I have it color coded. Green is good, red is bad, blue is in between, and then I have frowny faces and smiley faces. So you have your E1 and your E2 in the upper left corner, and then you have it along the left side, you have your phase 1 detoxification. So your 2, your 4, and your 16 OH. OH stands for hydroxy. Now let's see, I wonder if I can be cool enough to, here we go. I'm going to see if I can draw. I don't think it's going to let me. I was hoping to draw on this. Oh, well, we won't draw. But what I was going to show you was the way that it works. So your 2 at the bottom, your 4 in the middle, and then your 16. So your 2 is where you're trying to go. That's why it's green. Your 2-hydroxy is where you're trying to go. Now, your 2-hydroxy can become 2 different things. It can go down and form a stable adduct, which we will discuss, or it can go through methylation, become 2-methoxy, where it is excreted out, and you have a smiley face. That is the green. Your 4 pathway is the less desirable. It is the more carcinogenic. The 4 pathway can go 2 different options. It can go the green pathway again, utilizing COMT, become a methoxy, get excreted, smiley face, or it can become the red pathway, which we commonly call the quinone with a Q, quinone pathway. If it continues on the quinone pathway, it increases the chance for cancer risk, which is why you have the frown face. Now, thankfully, your body is smart, and your body has quinone reductase, which is NQO1, and you have GST, glutathione S-transferase, and they help get your estrogen away from the cancer risk and go back to the beginning so that you can methylate with COMT. GST, glutathione, as we know, glutathione is very potent, a very popular antioxidant. It can bind directly with the quinone and excrete it safely, and you get a smiley face. And then lastly, we have 16, the 16-OH, 16-hydroxy. 16-hydroxy is very estrogenic. It can cause heavy bleeding. It can cause tender breasts. It can cause things to grow. It does turn into estriol. Estriol is also known as 16-OH-E2, and then that gets excreted. So we go from a blue arrow to a green arrow. So 16 can make things grow, but once it's excreted, we have a smiley face. So the goal is to get on to phase 2. We want to use COMT, and we want to upregulate glutathione, sulfotransferase, and upregulate quinone reductase, which is NQO1. And at the end, we want to excrete everything through the intestines. So let's talk about each metabolite just really quickly again so you're aware. Please remember, these metabolites are free radicals. They do cause damage. So your 2-OH is less carcinogenic. It binds to the estrogen receptor. ER stands for estrogen receptor, with less affinity, not as tightly. It's not very estrogenic, and it does form something called a stable adduct in your DNA, which we will discuss. Once it becomes a methoxy, once it moves to phase 2, the methoxy is very protective. It's considered anti-proliferative, in some cases anti-cancer. It does have anti-aromatase activity, therefore it decreases the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. And most research says it does not bind to the estrogen receptor, but they can't entirely prove that. Most research thinks that it doesn't, but it's always possible it does, just very weakly. So we want to get to the methoxy. This is our goal. That leads us to the 4-hydroxy. Unfortunately, this has a lot of activity in our breast tissue, in our ovaries, in our uterus, our lung, our kidney. It's much more carcinogenic because of the unstable or these depurinating adducts. they do bind to the estrogen receptor higher and tighter than the 2-OH. So if there's a choice to bind to the estrogen receptor between the 4 and the 2, the 4 will win, and we don't want that. With estrogen itself, estradiol, that can increase the SNP that chooses 4-OH, known as CYP1B1. So women and men who have higher levels of estradiol, E2 floating around, can upregulate the 1B1 pathway, or women who are taking estradiol, too much estradiol, putting them in a dominant state might be a problem. That leads us to estriol. Estriol is known as 16-OH estradiol, or E2, and it is made primarily in the liver from the 16-hydroxylation of estradiol, or the dehydrogenation of 16-OH. So we come to estriol through two different ways. It's very, very weak. It is very weak at the estrogen receptor. Most of the time, we consider estriol more protective than anything. It generally prefers estrogen receptor beta, which is not the estrogen that is commonly associated with things like breast cancer. And like at the very last bullet point, it might help inhibit cancer cell growth, which is why estriol, most people like estriol. Estriol is also very important for vaginal lubrication, whereas estradiol is important for vaginal microbiome health. So they do two different things in the vagina, both very, very helpful. Then that leads us to 16-OH, E1. So the 16-hydroxy is very estrogenic, like I was saying. It binds very tightly and has a very high affinity for the estrogen receptor. This is why women and men who have high levels of 16-hydroxy tend to have heavy periods, clots, tender breasts. If they have fibroids, maybe their fibroids grow. Endometriosis might worsen, worse symptoms. The 16 is associated with proliferation. So for women who have breast cancer, it could make the breast cancer grow. And interestingly, it might be increased by a few reasons, but one is non-coffee caffeine, such as soda. So when women are drinking, Coke and Pepsi and all of those soda, for caffeine, as opposed to coffee, and they complain of heavy periods and tender breasts and endometriosis, have them stop might make a big difference. Okay. So knowing all this, how do estrogens cause breast cancer? How do they quote unquote cause breast cancer? It's through the formation of depurinating addicts. Now, cancer is formed lots of different ways. This is not the only way that cancer is formed. However, with estrogen, it's the one point I want to talk about today. So these depurinating addicts, and if we go back to my chart, that's where depurinating addicts form. It's the step right before potential, of course, cancer risk. It's on the red arrow and it gets a frown face, not a smiley face. So when it comes to adduct formation, what are they? So basically what happens is you have two forms. You have a stable and you have an unstable or depurinating. So stable adducts form in the DNA, and basically what they are is that they a base pair has been removed or switched. And so they're wrong, right? It's the wrong DNA base pair. So the coding moving forward is going to be wrong. But a stable adduct is wrong, and it sits in the DNA and it waits to be repaired. It's like a good child. It's like a good child that you say to, I want you to stay right here, touch nothing, and I will be right back. And when you come back, the child is right there and has touched nothing, made no mess, and then you can move on. So when you have a stable adduct, it waits in the DNA for your DNA repair mechanism to come in, find that it's wrong, fix it, and then let the DNA move forward. So there's no holes, less risk for mutation. It's not no risk for mutation. And the reason it's not no risk is because your DNA repair system can still mess up. But if it's moving thoughtfully and slowly, then less likely to form cancer. Unfortunately, though, the 4-hydroxy forms unstable addicts or depurinating addicts. So basically, the base pair is wrong and it breaks out of the DNA and that leaves a hole. and DNA does not like holes. We don't want holes in our DNA, right? A few holes are fine. Our DNA repair system will come in, find the hole, fix it, and let the DNA move on. But if you have too many holes, it's like a factory that's moving too quickly. You know, it's trying to make machines, but it's moving too quickly, and things start to get dropped. It starts to get painted the wrong color, the screws are wrong, it's coming out in the wrong order, and it doesn't really look like what it's supposed to look like. And that's what happens with depurinating addicts. And as a result, those mutations now code potentially for cancer. So it's a higher risk for mutation, of which it could be a cancer coder. And we definitely don't want that. So these researchers, Dr. Cavalieri, who is now retired, but Dr. Eleanor Rogan, they're big breast cancer researchers in the United States. And they found and do a lot with DNA addicts. And so they looked at 40 healthy women, 40 women at high risk, and 40 women with breast cancer. And they looked at their adduct amount in their body. Now, as we know, we always have cancer in our body, always, always. And it's the job of our immune system to take care of it. And we always have adduct formation. It's the job of our DNA repair to take care of it. So on the left-hand side in the green, you will see 40 healthy women and their adduct level, each hash, each line is a woman. That there's 40 lines across. So that's how many addicts she has, and it looks pretty low. In the middle, which is kind of a like bluish color, those are 40 women at high risk, and you can see their adduct level is much, much higher. And then on the far right, where it's more purple, those are women with diagnosed breast cancer, and it looks very, very similar to women at high risk. But the adduct level overall are higher and more dense. And so you can see that as women with breast cancer, their adduct, because of the mutation risk, greatly increases. So when we talk about estrogen detoxification, we're going to learn it as phase 1, then phase 2, and then phase 3. But I want you as practitioners to treat it as the opposite. I want you to treat it as phase 3 first, then phase 2, then phase 1. You're going to treat it backwards. And the reason that you do that is for this reason. This is my analogy. Think of a clawfoot bathtub. So in a clawfoot bathtub, phase 1 is the water filling up the bathtub. Is it the 2? Is it the 4? Is it the 16? Is it coming in fast? Is it coming in slow? What's the percentage coming in? Phase 2, using COMT or COMT, is your drain, right? Is your drain open? Is your drain closed? Is your drain open wide enough? How fast or slow do you methylate? That's what neutralizes, right, your free radicals. Then phase 3 is the sewer line out of your house. So is this dysfunctional? Is this causing backup? Or is your patient constipated? Do they have candida? Do they have microbiome issue? Do they have parasites? Do they have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO? And so the reason we start with 3 is just like you would start with 3 in your house. You want your sewer line, your intestines, to be open and healthy. Because if you only focus on the water, which is phase 1, no matter what you do, you can have the cleanest, purest, healthiest water in the whole world. But if it can't drain out, it will still overflow. It's the same in your body. If your intestines and your microbiome and your gut are not healthy, you're still just going to overflow and back up the system. So always start with 3 at the very least. But remember, we're going to learn it 1, 2, 3. We learn it in order. So how do you evaluate phases 1 and phase 2? This is where you do a Dutch test because we need urine to evaluate phase 1 and 2, not serum and not saliva, unfortunately, and not stool. So phase 1 and 2 are done in the urine testing for the Dutch test. So let's dive into phase 1. Remember, phase 1 is the water filling up your bathtub. What kind of water is coming in? So when we look at a Dutch test, at the top, you will see the estrone and estradiol, your main estrogens, right? And then they go through phase 1 detoxification. And in this example, the dials are red like a dial. So the star, one side of the star is the low end, the other star is the high end, And then the purple, there's a purple box, that's the menopausal range. So in this case, her estrone is high, her estradiol is high, her 16 is high, and her 2 is low. So this person really favors the 16. This person is having a lot of estrogen symptoms. What PMS, heavy periods, tender breasts, worse endometriosis, fibroids are growing, maybe weight gain, acne, water retention, all the things, all the estrogen things. So we evaluate phase 1, we have to look at the CYP or the CYP family preferences for estrogen. So CYP 1A1 and 1A2 primarily push the 2 pathway. 1B1 primarily pushes the 4 pathway, and 3A4 primarily pushes the 16 pathway. So we're just trying to upregulate and downregulate various pathways depending what you have when you do SNP testing. Please remember, though, that these CYPs, these CYP, your cytochrome P450 enzymes, work with everything, not just estrogen. We are talking about estrogen today, but they do work with lots and lots and lots of chemicals. So when you are using products to upregulate something or downregulate, remember you're affecting other chemicals and hormones in the body. And your CYP450 enzymes, these are what create free radicals. So the 1B1 creates the free radical that is known as 4-hydroxy or 4-OH. The 1A1 creates the free radical known as 2-hydroxy or 2-OH. So these are free radicals. We want to move them to the methoxy state. We want to upregulate COMT as fast as possible. When you're working with these, again, remember estrogen is not the only hormone or chemical or medicine that they metabolize. They do metabolize a lot of things. So first and foremost, what affects your family here? Well, they are iron dependent. If you are anemic, if you are low in iron, if you struggle with iron, you are probably going to struggle with your phase 1 detoxification. Environmental toxicants, PAH stands for polyaromatic hydrocarbon. PCBs, of course, xenoestrogens, phthalates, BPA, and plastic, all those things upregulate, increase your CYP activity, all of them, all of the activity. Smoking increases your activity. Barbecue, so the charred meat when you barbecue. And then the supplement, the herb, St. John's wort, will increase specifically CYP 3A4. Now, 3A4 is it's your biggest pathway. It's your biggest worker. Your 3A4 detoxifies almost every chemical that comes into your body, almost every medication that comes into your body, almost everything you come in contact with goes down the 3A4 pathway. So St. John's wort will speed that up, which can be helpful if you're slow and sluggish, but be careful. You want to make sure you can get through phase 2 and then phase 3. Otherwise, you'll have lots of free radicals. So what else? Inflammation. Inflammation will lower your 1A family and your 3A4 family. Grapefruit juice. This is why they tell people not to take medication with their grapefruit juice in the morning, because it will slow the detoxification and it'll make the medication hang out longer in the body. Ketoconazole is a antifungal. That's like a lot of people will use it. They'll take it when they have fungus in their feet, in other parts of the body. Verapamil, propranolol are heart medications. Berberine, we all use berberine, don't we? That can decrease 3A4. Now, what's interesting though, I will be honest, in the research, a lot of these are done on cells. So it's not like they gave somebody 500 milligrams of berberine and saw their 3A4 decrease. What they do is they look at cells and drop berberine on the cell. So should you never use berberine? No, you should. Of course, you should use berberine. Just keep this in the back of your mind. Just be careful. It's like with resveratrol, which that's actually a good thing. We want 1B1 slowed down. Alcohol will decrease the 2 but increase the 16. Artemisia, a lot of people will use that with gut infections, right? Worms, parasites. And Tegament, which is used for heartburn. All right, so now that you know what upregulates and downregulates your phase 1, your CYP family, let's go back to this one. This is a different person. This person still has elevated E1 and E2. you can see that their 16 is borderline high, their 4 is very high, hence the whoa, and their 2 is not as high as it should be. So it's slow clearance. I would want that much higher in relation to the rest of the estrogens. This person was given a supplement, DIM, diindolylmethane, and after 2 weeks, you can see all of the dials got so much better in just 2 weeks. DIM works fast. So estrone and estradiol went down, and the 2, the 4, and the 16 all went down as well compared to 2 weeks ago. So let's talk about your phase 1 DIM and your indole-3 carbinol. So indole-3 carbinol is primarily a phase 1 mover. Indole-3 carbinol does require stomach acid to break apart, and it primarily forms DIM. That's the one that we're after, right? So if your patient does not have good stomach acid, then they're going to struggle to break apart indole-3 carbinol. But what we're trying to get is DIM. And DIM, what it does is it increases the conversion of your estrogens down the 2 pathway. So it increases your CYP1 family, which is what moves to which goes to the 2. That's what we want. And it does that by binding to something called an aryl hydrocarbon receptor, AHR. And the AHR primarily upregulates the CYP1A, but in some people, it will upregulate the 1B as well. So sometimes you maybe give DIM to somebody and you do a Dutch test, and you'll see their 4OH go up. And you're like, I don't understand. I gave them DIM. In some people, because of this receptor, they will increase the 1B1 as well. Most people, though, it will upregulate the 1A1 and the 1A2. That pushes the 2 pathway, and that's what we're going for. To a small degree, in vitro and in animal studies, it will induce Nrf2. DIM is not my preferred supplement for Nrf2. My favorite is sulforaphane or Brocalox, which most of you are familiar with. But in animal studies, it does increase some Nrf2. Common dosage-ish, these are just rough, 100 to 300 milligrams a day. I get asked a lot, can't I just eat the brassica family? Can I just eat broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and kale and get enough of this? And in this study, specifically in 2016, they said you would have to eat about 600 grams a day, sustained for several years to achieve any anti-cancer benefit. And so 600 grams a day is a lot, right? 600 grams for those who don't work in grams, but work in cups, that's 2.5 cups a day. Now, a lot of you probably eat 2.5 cups of the brassica family every day, but you can see back in the study, it's a day for several years to achieve an anti-cancer benefit. And in some cases, it's still not enough. I have people that will, who maybe say they eat this already and they're 4 pathway or 16 pathway or higher, and their 2 pathway is lower. So I know the food is helpful, but it's not helpful enough. And that's where we need to add in the supplements. What is the possible concern with DIM? Well, DIM does pull estrogen out of circulation. So if she's menopausal, if she has low estrogen, if she has amenorrhea and her estrogen is already low, maybe don't use DIM. Maybe move on to phase 2 and phase 3, which you should do anyway. And in one study in 2014, they found that they dropped DIM onto breast cancer cells with no estradiol, and at small doses, again, it's just dropping, it's not like a milligram, that they actually activated the estrogen receptor alpha and increased breast cancer proliferation. But at higher doses, when they dropped it on the breast cancer cells, it was anti-proliferative. So this has not been repeated in human studies. This hasn't come through in human studies. So what I tell people, because of, I know DIM will lower estrogen anyway, I just don't use DIM in somebody who has who's in menopause. I don't use DIM in somebody with low estrogen, because if it's true, I don't know what a small dose and a high dose is, because they were just dropping them on cells. And I don't want a menopausal woman to have less estrogen in circulation. I want her to have estrogen for her brain, for her bones, for skin, for her heart, for her longevity. And so I'm very careful with the use of DIM. If a menopausal woman needs DIM, I tend to go for phase 2 support, phase 3 support, and then I will use like sulforaphane and glutathione to support Nrf2 instead. So I just go around it in menopausal women. Now, if she's a menopausal woman with breast cancer, active breast cancer, then I'm just really careful and I don't use it at all. I still use the phase 2, the phase 3, and the sulforaphane and the glutathione. So these are just possible concerns with DIM. So remember, please keep in mind that 2-hydroxy is not healthy per se. You'll read a lot. There are educators who say that the 2-hydroxy, the 2-OH is healthy. It's not healthy. It's just less carcinogenic. The 2-methoxy is the goal. That's really what they're considering anti-proliferative and good for the body. That one is good. We want men and women to have the 2-methoxy. So we want to upregulate that. We want to upregulate quinone reductase. We want to upregulate GST. And those are, when we get there, those are upregulated by Nrf2, Nrf2. Remember, the treatment is 3-2-1. So please don't just put everybody on DIM as your first line defense. We want to start with the intestines and work backwards. And then the CYP 1A1, 1A2, and 1B1 are not only for estrogen. So if you choose to modulate them, if you choose to increase or decrease them, make sure that his or her COMT is working and their intestines are working as well, because you want to get it out. So let's keep going. What about quercetin? Quercetin, you guys, quercetin is a very potent 1B1 inhibitor. That means it lowers the 4. The quercetin will lower the 4, which is great. It's less effective for 1A1 and 1A2, so that's your 2. It's very high bioavailability, thankfully. So in supplements and foods, we absorb a lot of quercetin. And if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, right now it tends to be allergy season. So we know quercetin reduces histamine and it reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines. So if she or he is experiencing the estrogen going down the 4 pathway and they have allergies, quercetin can help do both. The quercetin dose can be variable. 250 to 2,000 milligrams a day I saw in studies. The 2,000 I see much more for, it was an inflammation study, I believe I was looking at, and then allergies, severe allergies, when they were at 2,000. Most supplements are much lower than that, 250, 500, maybe 1,000. That's usually what I see. So quercetin lowers the 4-OH. Let's talk about coffee for all of you coffee addicts. Coffee is a good thing. Turns out the more coffee you drink, the more you will favor the 2 pathway. So in the orange box, you can see if the first column is less than 6 cups a day. So if we just look at 2-hydroxy E1, so which is tested on Dutch test, you can see it less than 6 cups a week, so less than a cup a day. That puts you at 45.7. But for you addicts out there, if you drink 4+ cups a day, then that your 2-hydroxy goes up to 69.6. So it will very heavily favor the 2 pathway. Just make sure your COMT and your microbiome and intestines are working. So if you were looking for a reason to justify your coffee intake every morning, you know now that it's helping your estrogen detox. It's helping push you down the 2 pathway. Just make sure your phase 2 and your phase 3 are working. So what else helps reduce risk and symptoms? Let's talk about quinone reductase, NQO1, and GST, glutathione transferase. So this is why NQO1 is named NQO1, because it's NADPH, quinone reductase. I always was like, why did they name it NQO1? They should have named it QR. But then I saw the scientific word and realized why. All right. Let's talk about NAC, N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine is a phase 1-ish and phase 2 metabolism mover. So it prevents damage to DNA by inhibiting the quinone or reacting with them. So we know that NAC and glutathione can bind to the quinone and then safely excrete it, right? That's a good thing. What it can also do, though, is it can take your estrogen that's going down the red pathway and turn it back to the beginning. It can go, whoa, 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 you're headed towards cancer. No, no. Let me turn you around, do a U-turn and push you back the other way. And then COMT can neutralize you. We know that NAC inhibits adduct formation by 60% or more by reacting directly with the quinone itself in vitro studies. Haven't seen it, they have not done human studies, but I'm all about it, at least in vitro studies. That's pretty awesome. And of course, we know that hydrolysis of NAC in the liver and the gut with cysteine makes, or because of the cysteine, eventually goes on to make glutathione. So NAC is a good one. Now, NAC in this particular study by Dr. Zaid and again, Rogan and Cavalieri, the big breast cancer researchers, they do a lot of research with NAC and resveratrol. And I have it highlighted in the middle. N-acetylcysteine was found to be one of the best inhibitors of the depurinating adducts in reaction mixtures. So I actually asked Dr. Rogan, I got to meet her in 2019, and she says that she takes, I believe she said 250 milligrams of N-acetylcysteine every day, which I know is a very low dose for N-acetylcysteine, but that's what she said she takes based on her research. So go Dr. Rogan. When in this study, just to give you a visual on her, when they're looking at addicts, this is adduct formation. So the bar graph going up is how many addicts they form. And you can see with no N-acetylcysteine in the mixture versus lots of N-acetylcysteine in the mixture. And lots is a 1-to-1 ratio that they gave of NAC. Again, they're dropping it in the mixture. It's not like milligrams, but 250 is what she said she takes personally. And you can see by giving lots of N-acetylcysteine, the addicts dropped dramatically. Now, many of you will ask me, can't I just give straight glutathione? What about glutathione, Carrie? Yeah, absolutely. You can give glutathione. Remember that glutathione has to be recycled, and you need all the cofactors to work. So selenium, FAD, vitamin C, especially this time of year, vitamin E, CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, ALA is alpha lipoic acid, magnesium, zinc, B6, folate, and B12. All of those are required to recycle and move glutathione round and round. And we know that glutathione itself is a recycler. So it helps with like vitamin C and vitamin E, and vitamin C recycles E and alpha lipoic acid, CoQ10 recycles C and E recycles C and CoQ10, and then ALA recycles C and CoQ10. So it's this big, and I have the graphic there to show you how all of your antioxidants help each other recycle themselves, which is really great and really pretty helpful. So yes, you can give glutathione, just make sure they're not deficient in some of these really important cofactors. I do get asked, is there a glutathione feedback loop? There is a glutathione feedback loop. This is from the new charts that are coming out from Dr. Ben Lynch. He gave me permission to use them. So there's glutathione right there in the middle, circled in red. If you give glutathione, there is a negative feedback loop. It inhibits the GCLC, which then makes you not make glutathione. So if you give glutathione as a supplement, you will slow down your own glutathione production. So Dr. Lynch says it comes back if you stop the glutathione supplement, that the negative feedback loop just stops, and then GCLC kicks in again and you make glutathione. So some people argue to give N-acetylcysteine, and some people want the straight glutathione because of the negative feedback loop. I'm kind of in the middle. I personally, sometimes I have both. I have N-acetylcysteine and glutathione, and sometimes intuitively I'll just grab N-acetylcysteine, and sometimes I'll grab both, and sometimes I'll take glutathione, and sometimes I'm lazy and I forget both of them. So just keep that in mind. Sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is my favorite, my absolute most favorite in the whole world. Sulforaphane is found in cruciferous vegetables, but specifically broccoli sprouts. But cauliflower and mustard sprouts have sulforaphane as well. To make sulforaphane, though, when you chew them, chop them, break it apart, you have glucoraphanin, and then glucoraphanin binds with the enzyme myrosinase, and when it gets with glucoraphanin, it forms sulforaphane. So the chewing of broccoli sprouts, the chopping of broccoli sprouts activates and forms sulforaphane. So once you make sulforaphane, what it can do is it can react with glutathione through your GST SNP, and by helping increase or activate your Nrf2 pathways. And your Nrf2 pathways are what activate and increase your phase 2 enzymes. Remember, phase 2 is like COMT, COMT, right? We want that because they're neutralized. They neutralize everything. So we want our Nrf2 upregulated. When you're looking at supplementation for sulforaphane, this is really important. There's a lot of sulforaphane-ish products out there, and it has to be standardized to include glucoraphanin and myrosinase that will yield a sulforaphane amount. You want to make sure the company that you use, like Broccolox, has a yield amount out the other end. So when you take it, that you know what you're getting. Unfortunately, some supplement companies, they provide only glucoraphanin, and they openly say that they rely on the microbiome to convert it into sulforaphane. The microbiome can convert it into sulforaphane, but studies say this is really wildly varying because of different microbiomes. And so even the studies were like, well, yeah, you can, but it's not very, like I may only convert 10% and Catherine might convert 60%, and she'll win because that's a much higher yield than mine will. So just be careful of that. There's also the mislabeling of sulforaphane glucosinate. That is only glucoraphanin, excuse me. So it's a little bit misleading because it's not sulforaphane that's in the product. It is glucoraphanin. And again, they tend to rely, they say that when you look up their sites, they rely on the microbiome to do it for you, and your microbiome might not. And then there's something called ESP in crucifers. And that inhibits myrosinase, and we don't want that. We don't want myrosinase inhibited. So some supplement companies don't screen for ESP, or they don't deactivate the ESP right in the supplement. So you have to be aware of that. So you can, and people are like, well, can't I just take broccoli sprouts? Like, yeah, of course you can take broccoli sprouts for sure. I don't have a green thumb. Growing things is not what I'm known for. So I just take the supplement because if you do broccoli sprouts, of course, you want to make sure that they're organic and mold free and fresh. And but some people are great at growing them at home easily. Obviously a lot of stores will sell them. So just, be very, very careful of what you buy. With broccoli sprouts, speaking of, you want to chop them, cut them, or chew them to create the sulforaphane. And studies suggest it's 0.5 to 1 teaspoon or 2 to 5 grams of powder of the powdered broccoli sprout is necessary to create the Nrf2 effect. Be aware that if you cook broccoli sprouts, microwave them, steam them, boil them, it can reduce the glucosinolates within minutes. And then if you use the broccoli sprouts and then in your cooking and then you store them, it will, like in this particular study said, in a plastic bag. I would doubt most of you are storing them in a plastic bag. Most of you are probably storing them in glass, but regardless, they call it open air storage. So even if you have a glass container and it's airtight, just the act of the air in the container can reduce the glucosinolates in 3 to 7 days. So whenever you use broccoli sprouts, you want to use them and eat them right there in the moment. And then this nifty little graph is showing there's your Nrf2. So keep one, KEAP, keep one, binds to Nrf2 and holds it. It makes it inactive. And when you have a stressor or, pro-oxidant or something happen, a free radical, then Nrf2 binds away. And then what happens is it binds to ARE. And that's when you get your phase 2 enzymes that get upregulated. And you can see the list at the bottom. So there's quinone reductase, heme oxygenase, GST, superoxide dismutase, catalase, transketolase. I mean, there's some, right? These are really important enzymes all around your body. So broccoli sprouts and sulforaphane for the win. You can see why I love it so much. All right, let's move on to resveratrol. So the thing about resveratrol is that it's in grapes, peanuts, wine. Apparently, allegedly, Cabernet Franc has the highest amount of resveratrol in it, and they like it because resveratrol raises quinone reductase. Just be aware it's still alcohol. Resveratrol is classified as a phytoestrogen depending on the concentration, competition, dose, and expression in the estrogen receptor. It can be turn it on or turn it off. So an agonist or an antagonist. But the great thing about resveratrol is that it inhibits 1B1 like quercetin. It inhibits 1B1 really significantly over your 1A1 or your 1A2. And resveratrol has been shown to induce Nrf2, which is, of course, really, really helpful, and anti-tumor. It increases your P53 tumor suppressor gene. So we like resveratrol. Unfortunately, with resveratrol, as we know, is that most all of the studies are done through in vitro and animal studies. It's not very bioavailable as when it goes through the liver, and the in vivo studies that they have done are days to a couple months. And so they question, like, is this long enough with resveratrol? But what they're thinking now, they're changing their view on resveratrol, and they're thinking that maybe resveratrol acts its metabolites act like a domino effect. So you take resveratrol and it kicks stuff off in the microbiome, which I'll show you a slide in just a second. And then that's what does it. So it's not like you take resveratrol and then you draw your blood looking for resveratrol. That's the problem. It's if you take 50 milligrams of resveratrol or 100 milligrams of resveratrol and then draw your blood for resveratrol, they're not finding it in the blood. But what they are thinking now is that resveratrol acts through the gut and then kicks a bunch of stuff off. So it is working, just not how we used to think. The research they have done in humans, though, the trans resveratrol, of course, which Nordic sells, is obviously the best, 8.8-fold higher compared to dry non-trans resveratrol. And the half-life of the trans resveratrol is short, though, 2 to 5 hours. So if you're doing resveratrol, you're going to want to dose it a couple times in the day. I have yet to see it, but there is research on micronized resveratrol, and they said for 14 days produced a higher plasma concentration. So there are human studies out there, just not as robust as the animal and the in vitro, but trans resveratrol is the way to go. I did look for cancer just to show you guys. There is an international conference on resveratrol and health, which I think sounds amazing. I would love to go to that. In 2014, it was in Hawaii. But unfortunately, they said to date, there are no real clinical trials exploring resveratrol in relation to cancer that have been published. So there's a lot more we need to learn about resveratrol when it comes to cancer. But we know that it can potentially do really great things. And just by inducing Nrf2 alone and decreasing the 4 in estrogen is huge. So when it comes to Nrf2, though, this is dose dependent. This is how much resveratrol do you need compared to how much sulforaphane do you need. And you can see sulforaphane, you need next to nothing to increase Nrf2, and resveratrol, you need a lot. But as I was saying earlier in 2020 this year, Dr. Jeffrey Bland and Dr. Tom Williams were saying they think it acts in the gut and it's a domino effect. The effect sort of cycles through, and then that's what kicks it off. So don't give up on your resveratrol. I think it's still worthwhile, especially if he or she is favoring the 4 pathway. Okay, so let's move on to phase 2. Phase 2 detoxification of estrogen. We are now in the drain part, which is your COMT. We want to know, how are you going to neutralize all of these free radicals? So this is an estrogen dominant person. Their 2-hydroxy is elevated at 6, and their 2-methoxy is in range, but not high enough compared to the 2-hydroxy. What does this mean in terms of the bathtub? This means you have a lot of water coming into your bathtub. Your drain is open. It's not open wide enough. So we need to open this drain wider. And in this particular case, look at that COMT is really slow. They have an AA, which is a 3 to 4-fold decrease in COMT activity. So they're sluggish. Their methylation activity is sluggish. So they're having a tough time getting from phase 1 to phase 2. And as we know what methylation is basically just giving the methyl group, right? The COMT is giving its M to the free radical to neutralize it. So that's why it's so important. But please don't confuse MTHFR and the act of methylation, right? We know that MTHFR and the act of methylation are not the same thing. MTHFR absolutely has a role in the whole methionine cycle, which I think I'll show you in just a second, and the outcome of methylation. But just because somebody has MTHFR SNPs, we have to look at COMT, and then we have to do the urine testing to see what's going on. So COMT, catechol O methyltransferase, is the big player here. It conjugates your estrogens, your 2 and your 4. It also conjugates your neurotransmitters, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So this person who has slow estrogen detox also has a slow ability to break down dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. This means this person is going to struggle with estrogen detox, and they're going to have more adrenaline floating in their system for longer. This person is probably prone to anxiety and anxiousness or nervousness, maybe insomnia, compared to somebody else because their COMT is slow. How does it work? Like I said, it takes uses a methyl group that's donated by SAM. So a lot of you are familiar with the supplement SAMe, and then it neutralizes it. The main cofactor is magnesium. Magnesium is used for proper binding of the catechol and SAM, although there is research to show that zinc might be as effective as magnesium. It's not quite as effective, but might be pretty effective. So much of the world is magnesium deplete. So much of the world is also zinc deficient. And so making sure for one, magnesium, but make sure their zinc levels are high will really help COMT work better. So again, this is the graph as provided by Dr. Lynch. And on the right-hand side, that's where SAM is. That's where COMT comes into play. And as you read this entire graphic, you can see all of the cofactors that go into making this go round and round and round again. So it's really important that their diet is on track, that they're absorbing their foods, right? That they're chewing their foods, they're breaking down their foods, they're getting their nutrients in. And then you can use like DNA Life and test to see some of these SNPs if they're sluggish or not. In this study done in 2007, they basically completely inhibited COMT, completely inhibited it. They gave it a COMT inhibitor, and they found much, much, much higher levels of depurinating adducts, 3 to 4 increase in the level of depurinating adducts. So this is how important getting your COMT healthy is for estrogen. Lots of things slow it down. Obviously, the mutation, which you just saw on the prior page, being estrogen dominant, unfortunately, having a lot of estradiol will slow it down. Gut infections, this is why doing stool testing is so important. Certain phenols from foods and supplements, e.g. CG, the supplement. Quercetin, unfortunately, right? We're using quercetin for allergies and the 4, but quercetin might also slow down COMT. High levels of SAH, which is SAW. I'll show if we go back. Let me just show you real quick where SAW is. So on the arrow, right where the red arrow is, SAM is above it, and so SAM, and then SAM donates, and then SAW is at the bottom of that dotted circle. So if you have too much SAW, if you can't make SAM, if you can't get it back around again, then you will have issues with COMT. So bisphenol and PCB exposure, serotonin, I particularly see this with women and men on antidepressants, SSRIs, SNRI. Serotonin will block the SAM receptor in the COMT. So ask your patients if they're on an antidepressant medication. Of course, there are medications that are COMT inhibitors. Why would somebody be on a COMT inhibitor? Parkinson's, because you don't want to break down dopamine, right? So that will with Parkinson's patients. And then early life adversity, victims of abuse, robbery, rape, childhood trauma, etc. Please be aware that now in 2020 with coronavirus, it is being considered, of course, an adverse childhood event. So all the kids, all the adults as well that are living through corona right now and having to deal with lockdown and illness and potentially death and bereavement, and their whole life changing, like that's going to affect our, the way our DNA works in our body and for generations to come, that transgenerational medicine. So we need to be on top of it as healthcare providers right now. So what do you need for phase 2 in COMT? SAMe, of course, magnesium, zinc, trimethylglycine, betaine, methionine, choline, your methylated B vitamins. These are all the COMT supporters. Notice I don't say DIM. DIM is not in there. Notice I don't say indole 3-carbinol. Indole 3-carbinol is not in there. Those focus on phase 1. We are focusing on phase 2 right here. So please, when you're trying to understand maybe why your person is sluggish or slow, go back to this chart and make sure that their nutrients and cofactors are, in a healthy manner in their body to help this whole pattern, the methionine pathway, go round and round. All right, so why is phase 2 important? Again, it makes your phase 1 metabolites that are harmful reactive oxygen species water soluble, so you can excrete them. This is the drain to your bathtub. The water came in, the drain is leading it out. And where is it leading it out? It's leading it out to your sewer line. So let's go to your sewer line and wrap this up. So phase 3, the sewer line out, you want to make sure this is not dysfunctional and not causing a backup. How do you get from the liver to the sewer line? Well, obviously you're going to do stool testing. You're going to have to do stool testing and see what's going on in the gut. So let's look at estrogen and the gut microbiome. It's called the estrobolome. And if you've ever heard me lecture before, you'll know that it's my favorite word to say in science right now because it's just fun to say, estrobolome. And it is a combination between estrogen and the microbiome. That's how they came up with it. And basically what they found is that it's the gene, the the bacterial genes in your gut that make an enzyme that deal with the metabolism of estrogen. And it's heavily influenced by medications, environment, toxicants, your diet, stress, all of those things. And interestingly enough, the way they found it is that they injected a lot of women with radio-labeled estradiol, estrone, and estriol. Then they collected their stool in stool testing, and they expected to see all of the estrogens out the other end, and they didn't. A lot of the estrogens were absorbed back into the body, and they realized it's the enzyme beta-glucuronidase that's the issue. So beta-glucuronidase, it's encoded by GUSes, gut bacterial beta-D glucuronidases. We're going to talk about your GUSes. So it's an enzyme in the large intestines. Basically, what does it do? Like really, what it really does is it deconjugates. So it removes the glucuronic acid on the estrogen. So after you've gone through phase 1, gone through phase 2, you are prepared to be excreted out the intestines. And if you have too much beta-glucuronidase, it will remove the neutralizing part and send you back off into circulation. The GUS gene is represented by your Bacteroides and your Firmicutes. So when you're looking at your microbiome, if you have an excessive amount in this phyla, the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes, you could have excessive amount of beta-glucuronidase. So with estrogen, like I was saying, by removing the glucuronic acid, it sends the estrogen back into circulation. So let me give you an analogy, which is right there in the picture. So your estrogen is in a box with a lid and a bow, and it's ready to go out through your intestines. Beta-glucuronidase will cut off the bow and take off the lid, and now estrogen gets reabsorbed. It flies free. So it opens up the packaging to allow estrogen to get reactivated. Please be aware, beta-glucuronidase is not all bad. We need it to help us break down large carbohydrates, our flavonoids, and help with bilirubin reabsorption. It should not be zero. We need some, but too much is the problem. And too much may contribute to the development of obesity, metabolic syndrome, cancer, endometrial hyperplasia, so that's thick, the lining in the uterus becomes thick and can become endometrial cancer, endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, fertility issues, cardiovascular disease, and cognitive issues, cognitive function. So by addressing the gut, we can help reduce all of these things. How does it relate to estrogen dominance? By increasing circulating estrone and estradiol right from the gut, now you have more estrogen symptoms. You're activating estrogen receptors in men and women. With specifically in breast cancer, though, they're just really starting to get into this with research. And so I have it quoted, the studies targeting at the relationship between breast cancer and the gut microbiota are quite limited so far, but they're getting there. They're really looking at this. And they're finding when they compare the microbiome of breast cancer patients with controlled patients, that the breast cancer patients really have an altered microbiome. So if you're actively working with breast cancer patients, do stool testing on them and start at the gut. They have a less diverse gut bacteria among postmenopausal breast cancer patients. And cancer patients had higher, but not statistically significant levels of systemic estrogens. But again, we know that it's the level may or may not come into play, but really it's their phase 1 and their phase 2. So if their phase 1 or phase 2 are wrong, and they just keep recirculating estrogen out of the gut, it's going to continue to go down the wrong pathway. And so that's what we're trying to work with. In this one, 31 women with early stage breast cancer, they found that Firmicutes and Bacteroides phyla were the most numerous. Again, that's what increases beta-glucuronidase. This research study says breast cancer and breast microbiome research are in the early stages, but an exciting area of study. There is research going on looking at the microbiome obesity and breast cancer, and the microbiome inflammation and breast cancer. How exciting is that? So imagine if they find, well, they will find, let's be honest, they probably will find that there's a huge relationship between microbiome obesity and breast cancer and microbiome inflammation and breast cancer. So how you were supposed to get out? The ovaries make estrogen, the body uses it, it gets cleared through the liver, it goes out into the gut, most of it's supposed to go and some of it gets reabsorbed. In an unhealthy microbiome, though, the ovaries make it, the body uses it, the liver detoxifies it, but beta-glucuronidase keeps most of it in the body and only a teeny tiny bit gets excreted out, and that's what can lead to problems. So first and foremost, what do? You have to test. We have to test and see what your microbiome looks like. Not only the beta-glucuronidase, but I want to know your good bacteria, your bad bacteria, parasites, candida, inflammation, all of that comes into play, right? Not just beta-glucuronidase. So number one, we focus on diet. We know that that you can induce large temporary microbial shifts in 24 hours. This means whatever you ate 24 hours ago, your gut microbiome right now listening to this webinar is different if you ate differently. So if you decide because of the situation that you're gonna, eat a bunch of junk that you don't normally eat, or you bought food in a panic and you bought a whole bunch of stuff, that's just unhealthy, but it's comfort food and you ate it yesterday, today your microbiome is different. But keep in mind, 24 hours from now, your microbiome will change again if you go back to a healthier eating pattern. So that is very encouraging. Beta-glucuronidase is increased by sugar, processed food, Western diets, alcohol, toxicants, antibiotics, low consumption of fruits and vegetables, low consumption of fiber. Kind of a no-brainer. We know this. Number two, we want to increase our prebiotics and our resistant starches. Eat artichoke, eat dandelion greens, eat jicama, chicory root, partially hydrolyzed guar gum, pectin, prebiotics. You can get prebiotics as a supplement. Also looking at your probiotics and your fermented foods, right? We want to eat for the gut. So probiotics and fermented foods can be really helpful. Number three, we want to look at raw, unpeeled organic carrots. So wash them, just don't peel them. And the full carrot, not like the little baby carrots, like a real carrot. So raw, unpeeled organic carrots, the fiber is mostly insoluble cellulose and the wall is pectin. There's your prebiotic. So the insoluble fiber helps promote GI regularity, increases stool bulk, increases short chain fatty acid production, which we know is really important for butyrate in the colon, decreases beta-glucuronidase and sulfatase. We don't have time to talk about sulfatase, but sulfatase is what takes the S off of DHEA and the S off of estrogens some estrogens go down the sulfation. So estrone sulfate, estradiol sulfate, testosterone sulfate. Sulfatase will snip them off and now those hormones will recirculate. So, and then decreases the opportunity for hormones and toxins to be absorbed. So go out and eat raw, unpeeled, but washed organic carrots and get your fiber in. Number four, reducing antibiotic and toxicant exposures. I'm not against antibiotics. If you need antibiotics, take antibiotics. But unfortunately, I feel that antibiotics get used for absolutely everything, whether somebody needs it or not. And antibiotics are given, but then the gut repair and the cleanup is not done after the fact. So the good thing about you as a practitioner listening is that if somebody takes antibiotics, it can do damage to the gut and affect the microbiome. And so you will just help your patient and your client to heal and fix their gut after the fact. Toxicant exposure, this is where you're looking at labels. You're filtering water. You're filtering the water in your shower, right? You're looking at what you put on your skin, your hair, your cleaning products. You're looking at, the scents like the products that people use, the plug-in products that drive me absolutely nuts. All that you breathe in and will affect your estrogens. There's so many studies on toxicant exposures and the gut, and this is just a small sampling, but you can look at PubMed and see quite a bit. Number five, eliminate or reduce alcohol, which I know can be really hard in a very stressful time right now. But as we know, alcohol has to get detoxified through the liver as well. And when alcohol goes through the liver, estrogen gets essentially pushed to the back and then just continues to recirculate. Alcohol will win as far as priority on getting detoxified. So the more alcohol you drink and you're experiencing PMS, heavy periods, tender breasts, men who get the belly and breast development and they're moody, they're not motivated, we have to consider alcohol, right? We have to consider alcohol and reduce alcohol, especially in that estrogenic man or woman. Now, a lot of you will say to me, well, Carrie, I drink tequila and tequila doesn't affect my blood sugar as much. Like, that's great, still alcohol. Or I'll get the question, well, Carrie, I only drink biodynamic, organic, low sugar wine. Like, that's great. Me too. Still alcohol. You still have to detoxify it through your liver. So don't negotiate your alcohol choices with me. You know the studies in regards to estrogen. And then number 6, we're going to look at calcium D-glucarate, the supplement. It is a beta-glucuronidase inhibitor. It does not lower beta-glucuronidase. It just inhibits it. So it keeps the bow on the box so estrogen doesn't run free. You still have to address the microbiome and the gut because you still have to address the estrogen microbiome that makes the beta-glucuronidase. So calcium D-glucarate, please don't confuse it with calcium directly, although calcium D-glucarate, CDG, has 10%, roughly 10% elemental calcium in it. So I did have somebody ask me the other day, they absolutely cannot do calcium at all in their diet for whatever reason. And I said, well, calcium D-glucarate does have calcium in it. So got to be careful. 10%, low percentage, but still. So dosing is very high when it comes to calcium D-glucarate. Most studies on animals start at 1,500 to 300 milligrams per day, that's what they're recommending for humans. But in animal studies, it was much higher doses on the milligrams per kilogram of the animal body weight. Although I have found every single time, every little bit helps. So calcium D-glucarate can be expensive. And I have found that by just working with the gut, and even 500 milligrams has been really effective. If somebody has cancer, then I may use the higher doses, 1,500 to 3,000. But for the everyday man or woman, I'm just trying to work with their gut and their estrogen, I'll use lower doses, and I find that it works. So that makes me really, really excited for that. There are foods that are high in calcium D-glucarate. They're just not in therapeutic doses, but you can add these to their diet. And look, cruciferous vegetables. So you get your DIM as well. So let's do a quick summary. We're at the end. I know we went a little over. I said I had a lot of slides to cover in an hour. So here's your visual. Phase 1 and 2, we look at the liver. So the liver, right? You have your ovaries, adrenal glands, adipose tissue, and other organs, and men or women, right? Women obviously is the ovaries. Men, it's the adipose tissue. Makes your estrogen. And then you circulate your estrogen in your bloodstream, and then it goes into your liver. And then, ta-da! We move out to phase 3. So now you have to conjugate them, and then some of it gets urinated out, and then the rest of it goes through phase 3 in the estrobolome. And if you have a healthy estrobolome with low beta-glucuronidase, then you get a smiley face. But if you have high estrobolome with high beta-glucuronidase, you get a frowny face, and now you reabsorb it back into circulation, and then you have to start the whole thing over again with that estrogen. So this is your easy to understand view of phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 detoxification. So quick summary, we learn it as phase 1, 2, and 3, but we address it as 3, 2, 1. And now you know the unstable or the depurinating adducts are the real problem because they can punch out the holes in the DNA, and now your repair system has to fix the holes. And if there are too many holes to be fixed too quickly, that's when mistakes happen. And if you don't test your estrogen metabolism in urine, you won't know where the problem lies. I don't know the difference between somebody who has a phase 1 issue and a phase 2 issue. The symptoms are basically the same. And so I can't, if you're like, well, she has PMS, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. You'll have to test. You want to look at COMT, quinone reductase, and QO1 and GST, the SNPs, to help with proper excretion. Don't forget about your transporters, which we actually didn't get get to talk about, but transporters are what help move your hormones around. And one of the helpful things for transporters is dark chocolate. So I always put that in there because we want to be able to move your hormones easily from in the cell to out of the cell. And believe it or not, dark chocolate can help. So I told you about coffee earlier, and this is a pro plug for dark chocolate. An unbalanced microbiome will raise hormone levels. Do stool testing for further evaluation, of course. And number 8, you are what you eat and absorb and what your microbiome does with you. So eat for your liver and for your microbiome. And if you have to drink alcohol, you might as well choose Cabernet Franc because that will at least get you some Resveratrol, and that will hopefully help you reduce your 4-OH pathway, but it is still alcohol. And that concludes our talk. Thank you so much, everyone, for hanging in there for 123 slides. I hope you learned a lot, and I'm sure I could hear the question thing going crazy. So I'm assuming that there are probably a number of questions. So let's see if I can.
I'm just going to unmute myself. I have
Yes.
tried to answer some of the questions that came in while you were talking. One of them was in the study you had with the coffee. What type of coffee? Did they specify caffeine free or just black Americano or
just black? Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't, I'd have to pull the study again. It is when you get this, you can pull the study. But I don't believe they looked at decaf. I think it was just caffeinated. And I don't believe they looked at like, I mean, I think it was a research study, so they just pulled coffee. So they didn't pull like an organic, mold-free, you know, healthy kind of coffee. I think they just picked coffee and did a study on it.
Excellent.
Good question. Yeah.
Another question comes up. What about sulfation in regards to breast cancer patient and SALT
Yes.
181?
Yep. Huge, huge. I just didn't have time to talk about it in an hour, but yes, definitely. The sulfation is really important. And I mentioned just a little bit here. Let me see if I can find sulfatase. Do I have that? So sulfatase, of course, will affect, oh, here, right here. So carrots, decrease sulfatase. Sulfatase is what, in the gut, what takes the S off. And so for DHEA-S, estrone S, estradiol S, testosterone S, yeah, salt is very important. I just didn't have time in an hour to talk about it.
No problem. People are beginning to check out, but you still have about 98% of those who started. So you're doing well, Carrie.
Yay!
Another
I hope everyone learned a lot.
Was back to estrogen and measurements and so on, but like with the hormone coils and so on, and also hormone replacement therapy and the contraceptive pill in relation to measuring levels of estrogen on the Dutch test.
So on the birth control pill, so if it's the birth control pill, the patch, the ring, or the injection for birth control, that will shut down your own estrogen and progesterone production. Remember, it tells the brain to stop making those hormones. And so if somebody is on the birth control pill, I don't generally recommend the estrogen and progesterone will look very, very low because the birth control pill is working. The androgens and the cortisol and the organic acids will all be fine. It's just we don't pick up synthetic hormone. We don't pick up the fake estrogen in the birth control pill. If somebody is, let's say, menopausal and she is on estrogen replacement therapy, she's on estradiol, we will pick that up. That will be picked up, and we will be able to see how she is detoxifying that. If she is on a coil, none of the coils have estrogen in them. The Mirena or the Skyla or the Kylina, which are all the progestin only, they affect primarily progesterone. They can, in some women, they can partially or fully suppress ovulation, thus reducing progesterone. I will say though, the Mirena, which is the strongest coil, we do see it tend to raise estrogen levels. We don't know why. And I have asked other lab companies, my friends who work at other competitor labs, I'm like, do you see the Mirena coil raise estradiol? They're like, yeah. According to the package insert, the Mirena does not have BPA or, you know, stuff like that in it, but there's got to be something in the packaging that is affecting estrogen levels, because we see it elevate, but there is no estrogen in it. That's what's tricky. And then in the Paragard or the copper, there is no estrogen in that. Now, copper itself can affect estradiol levels. I don't see it dramatically enough to say every time it increases. I don't see that, but copper itself can affect estradiol in some women. It can increase it.
Excellent. There's questions are continuing coming in, but we have to stop at one stage, and I think it's about now. Remember to check in next week at the same time, where Carrie will talk about patterns and pearls from the Dutch test. So maybe some of the questions will be answered next, and otherwise you just have to keep asking for more education, of course, but also really God, it's very dark where I am now.
And I was like, what happened?
But also, I mean, we are giving you the test offers, and you will get it in an email. We will send it out tomorrow together with the recording and so on, and other informations, and really get started and get working with it yourself and educate yourself through your patients and so on. We are here to support you as much as we can, and that's what these webinars are for as well. There is also a whole 3-day video recording of Carrie talking about the Dutch test that we did in Helsinki. It's in our education shop, so you can go in and look at it there and see if it's something you want to use and spend your time on for the next few weeks if you don't have much else to do. So, but hopefully see you next week. And Carrie, thank you very much. And thank you everyone in the whole world for joining us. And take care. And we do, like, you can't see me really, but we do the elbow.
Oh, the elbow bump.
Yeah, at the moment. Take care, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.